Hello and welcome to another episode of The Standings, where we review the sports standings except we're sitting. I'm Daniel, and I'm of course joined by Cameron today. We're missing Morgan today, she's a little sick, so get well soon. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how is your March Madness going so far?
I'm a Syracuse fan, so 0. We weren't even involved. This is probably the first year we missed it in the last decade, so not really that good.
It's pretty devastating. I think a 6, honestly. I had North Carolina going pretty far. And they fell flat on their face in the first round. So not too good so far, but 3 of my 4 remaining Final Four teams are still in. So we're going to dive into it. Our first topic is the NCAA men's and women's tournament results. And my question to you is, what can be said about the results so far? And does it change your opinion on your eventual champion or any other teams?
At least for the women's, there's always been very little parity in each of the tournaments. The number 1 seed always dominates the 16th seed. UConn dropped 103 against Arkansas State. That was a horrible game to watch for Arkansas fans. Probably really good for UConn, but I say for the women's, should knock down the teams to 34, keep the play in, and then have that fully readjusted. I know I don't like taking away from other teams, but the last couple of years there has not been many competition from the lower seeds.
6 teams scored 100 points in those games, and we haven't seen that in every tournament, but 6 teams in this tournament did. We're talking about UConn, Tennessee, South Carolina, these really good teams against teams that should not be in the tournament. So I totally agree with you. Let's knock it down to 34, maybe even 32. Just cut it straight in half from what it was, because we don't need that many teams in the tournament. It shows a clear skill gap between these teams that are in right now. As far as the men's go, there was no 13 seed or lower that advanced, and this is the first time since 2017 that this has happened. So we're running into a situation where we have to pinpoint what is the issue, how can we fix it, and what I'm going to blame it on is NIL. NIL has created a skill gap between the teams that can pay their athletes and the teams that can't pay their athletes. In the women's bracket, we see the teams that are getting these 4-star, 5-star high school athletes. And what it looks like is a D1 team against a D3 team in every single matchup. When we look at the men's bracket, there's not as much of a skill gap, which is why I will not say condense the tournament to 32. Keep it at 64, because again, it's the first time since 2017 that we haven't seen this happen. But there is that clear skill gap, and it's going to run into a situation similar to what we've talked about on the show many times with the MLB, where they have no salary cap. And with that, it just creates the teams that have money are the best teams in the league. The teams that don't have money are not the best teams in the league.
Yeah, this year especially, it felt like the SEC bias that's so fond from football. It happened in basketball. I'm normally not used to seeing at least 4 or 5 SEC teams being top 5 in their conferences.
And I think I have to argue with that as well and say, you know what? Maybe these teams that are in the tougher conferences should be valued more, because we saw 14 teams from the SEC get in, which is a monumental amount for one conference. Granted, there's more than 20 teams in that conference, but maybe even more of the teams should have got in. Because at this point, it is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I definitely think that, I know football is the main moneymaker now, but I feel like now having a football team is really important for your basketball team, because all that NIL money can be used towards all your other sports. It's really weird how NIL has affected every aspect of college sports.
And we talked about in the college football playoff. With that playoff, I made the argument that a team that's in the Mountain West should not be in the tournament. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be in the tournament, but more than one team from that conference should not be in this tournament.
No.
And the women, I have to argue, it's actually different from the men's, where it is a way wider skill gap. It's a monumental skill gap where you're looking at the games and they're not even competitive. It's not even worth turning on the television for something like that.
No, I would have to agree. The top-end women's talent they are phenomenal, and they can kick anybody's butt any day of the week. And it just sucks when they don't have the funds or the programming to do that. Women's sports need more money, period.
Let's move into our next topic. Let's continue with that March Madness talk. And I'm going to take you to the men's side of the tournament and ask you, after seeing these results in the tournament, how has your opinion changed on your eventual champion or any other team?
I'm going to stand true to my word that has been here since we started talking about it. Alabama is still my champion in this whole bracket. I know they struggled that first week, which I was really nervous about, but then they ran out and kicked butt. I have no problem still picking Alabama being the number 1, but Florida is definitely the favorite in this whole tournament so far.
Florida was my pick, and we're going to talk about it, but Alabama might eventually face Duke, and that is going to be a great game. And as a Duke fan, I am scared of Alabama. It's going to be a really good game. Duke has looked phenomenal so far, though. I was a couple minutes into watching the Baylor game, and I just knew this team was way better than their opponent. It'll be interesting because Duke needs to get past Arizona first, and they have Caleb Love, who in their last matchup, when he was on North Carolina, he scored 28 in their win. So now you're going against a guy who has a proven resume against you.
The big factor that's going to happen in that game is the bench. Like I said before, Alabama's bench is top 5 in the nation, and I'm not so sure about Arizona's. So I'm still going to bank on the bench being the most important factor in this game instead of one superstar.
So I'm my eventual champion, and looking at Florida, that matchup with UConn was very interesting because it made it so that they are a proven team now that can win in those tight matchups. And it was more of a coaching affair where it was Dan Hurley versus Todd Golden. I think we can all agree on that. And, of course, Hurley was a little mad afterwards at the officiating. But now we see a Florida team that has beat the 2-time champion. This is a great win for them.
That makes you the undeniable favorite. Like I said, the Eagles beat the Chiefs. Who are the favorite next year for Super Bowl? The Eagles are the favorite. It's basically like that. Taking down Goliath is the biggest thing that you can do.
I think one thing we could look at is I picked North Carolina to go to the Final Four, which is just so embarrassing for me. I based it off of a stat that a double-digit seed has made it in the past 5 years. And now we talk about this NIL, which has changed everything. Now we have a lot of really good teams that are just advancing, and it's always the higher seed. So someone like Morgan, who filled out her bracket, and she had a bunch of high seeds on there, I thought she was out of her mind. She did not know what she was doing. She was playing it safe, and she looks really good now. Her bracket does not look very tarnished.
That's really good to mention that. This year there hasn't been a Cinderella story whatsoever. There's been a 5-seed gap between each winner and loser. There has not been a Cinderella story. There hasn't been St. John. There hasn't been Villanova. There hasn't been something really heartbreaking to happen to a good team.
The only team we could look at is Arkansas, who's the 10 seed, and they're the only one that's left. But
Clemson, maybe, but even then, some people had Clemson losing that game.
Yeah. So I had Clemson going to the Elite Eight. That was a huge mistake by me. I had them going really far in the tournament. And what that really says about Clemson is, and Louisville, who also got knocked out in the first round, is that the ACC isn't as good as it's been so far. And my dad actually told me that before I made my picks in the tournament. He says, stay away from those ACC teams because they are not as good as you think.
ACC is not SEC.
So another team that I want to mention is St. John's. St. John's is a team that most people had going far or even into the Final Four. And we talked about it on last week's episode where we said that a top 21 offense and top 31 defense has been the eventual champion each of the last 10 years. So with that being said, they came in as the 60th ranked offense. And it really showed when there was 8 whole minutes of gameplay where they had no field goals.
You can't win off that. I think that's the main thing. Now, college is all about scoring points. Defense really doesn't really matter that much in basketball, at least college-wise. If you can score, you can beat anybody.
R.J. Lewis was the star of that team, and he went 3 for 17 in that game. You can't have your star player go 3 for 17.
And you can't expect to win.
So, on the eventual champion, in Auburn's conference, I'm going to stick with them losing to Michigan. I'm going to stick with my gut and say that they're going to lose to Michigan. Michigan looks really good in this tournament so far for a 5 seed, in my opinion.
I'm going to have to agree with you there. Michigan looks phenomenal. Another heartbreaking loss for Texas A&M.
I'm going to shift to the Midwest Conference. We're going to talk about Tennessee. I still have them coming out of the Midwest, but Houston actually looks really good. I had them losing to Clemson, so now Houston looks really good so far.
I think Houston's still a favorite over Tennessee with that fantastic defense in this whole tournament.
Yeah. Let's move into our commercial break. We will be right back after this.
My name is Abby Blancato, and I'm an anchor for Royal Studios. Right now, I'm behind the set of the show. You're watching The Standings. You can catch me on Royals Weekly every Friday, where we cover all things University of Scranton. From campus clubs, events, and sports news, you'll get everything you need. Until then, back to The Standings.
Welcome back from the break. We're going to talk about NFL free agency. It has cooled down a little bit, but what is your favorite move of the whole free agency since the last time we talked?
I don't know about favorite move, but I'm going to say my favorite team so far overall. The Vikings have done a phenomenal job signing Allen and Javon Hargrave. That is just a nasty interior defensive line, especially with Dallas Turner coming off the edge.
So one of my teams was the Broncos. The Broncos had a very good free agency. They got Evan Ingram, Trent Sherfield, who's a gritty little receiver that can block, Dre Greenlaw, who kind of flew under the radar, and then they got Hufanga and then DJ Jones as well. They look really good, and for a team that was third in their division, they're going to be able to compete here.
I think they can definitely take that number one spot in that division. I think the Chiefs cannot compete with Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga, let alone. Hufanga is a former All-Pro, let alone. So I don't know how the Niners even let him walk to begin with. I know he had an ACL injury last year, but, come on. A former All-Pro you don't let walk.
And we talked about it. It was kind of the blueprint in the Super Bowl that the Eagles gave and the Bucs did in years past to beat this team. So building that interior is great for the team because they're going to get to the quarterback, and that quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. He's a game changer. So if you can eliminate him from the game, you see what happens.
Well, I want to go back to the Vikings a little bit. Can we talk about how the Vikings are setting up J.J. McCarthy for ultimate success with signing Ryan Kelly, who had a 77.5 PFF rating the past 3 years, and even signing Elijah Moore for a great slot option?
I love Elijah Moore, and I don't know if the Vikings really believe in J.J. McCarthy. There was a lot of reports surrounding J.J. where they wanted Aaron Rodgers, and then there was one about Ryan Tannehill. I mean, that's just absurd. So I'm a little in disbelief that they believe in J.J. McCarthy, but if the report is right that they do believe in J.J. McCarthy, I agree with you. He is set up for success, but do the Vikings think he will be successful?
I think they need a good backup. He needs development time. The Ryan Tannehill story, I think that's the perfect fit, especially for Kevin O'Connell. But yet again, this is building a team for the future and building for a quarterback, which the Bears have also done. What they have made multiple moves to improve that offensive line for Caleb Williams, which is another phenomenal thing that Ryan Poles has done for Caleb Williams.
Let's shift to some of the big losers. I'm going to talk about the Niners. The Niners are huge losers in this free agency. They lost 17 of their 52 starters. That is a number that you cannot replace. And in a division now where we'll talk about Seattle got better on offense and the Rams retained Stafford, that looks really good for those teams. And all of a sudden the Niners are either the second worst or the worst in the division.
That's called the quarterback tax, where now the rookie deal is done, and now you have to pay your quarterback $200 million now. That's just a horrible thing that happens to every team. That window closed shut really fast.
I'll shift to a team that we've both liked talking about, who has spent a lot of money on their quarterback, on their receivers, and now they have a defensive end in Trey Hendrickson, who's under a 1-year, $16 million deal that if he doesn't play, they need to give him money. And if they give him money, how much of the cap is going to eat up?
I Steelers fan, I digress, but I think this is a horrible blueprint. You cannot pay 25% of your cap to 3 players alone on offense when you have a horrible offensive line and a top-bottom defense. It is an insane blueprint of how not to build your team.
So if the Bengals get Trey Hendrickson to play, let's give you this scenario. They get him to play under that $16 million deal. All 4 of them are signed. This is a one-and-done season. Hendrickson will want his money next year, and he'll want more money than he wants now because the cap only goes up, as we've seen. Players have been getting paid nonstop. So now you have Burrow, you have Chase, you have T. Higgins, and you have to sign this guy. It's going to be all of your cap. You're not going to have room for the other 48 players on the roster. This season, Burrow needs to be an MVP level quarterback. That team needs to be in the Super Bowl bubble and make an AFC championship at the very least.
No, I have to agree, but they should really be doing what the Bills were doing, and they should also pay Trey Hendrickson now before he becomes more expensive after Micah gets his contract. But look at what the Bills have done. They have extended everybody. They're not fully stars yet, but they're paying them early so they don't have to worry about it later.
And I'm glad you brought up Parsons. Parsons is about to go into Dallas, like I said last week, and ask for a ton of money. So the more you wait, the more the market goes up, like you just said. If you wait and this athlete wants more money, you are digging yourself in a bigger hole if he has a great season as well. If he decides to play and say, hey, I want to prove it on the field, and he does prove it on the field, you are either losing one of your best or you're just spending more money.
And even if they have a down year, they're still going to ask for that same amount if they're a former All-Pro. I had one down year, I had a nagging injury. I'm still asking for that $30 million if I'm a former All-Pro. I'm not going to move in that number.
At least $30 million.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, the Giants. My favorite move of free agency has been Jameis Winston to the Giants. Why? Because he's going to give an optimistic spark to that team. I know this is not an interesting move, but I don't think free agency has been interesting at all. So Jameis Winston to the Giants will give them a little spark at quarterback. The one thing I've seen is there are reports that they are now interested in Russell Wilson, and that is just absurd to me because you are going to get a rookie quarterback if you stay in your spot. So get a rookie quarterback, have him under Jameis Winston, and revamp your team because you're the fourth best team in that division. You're not going to be any higher than that.
I don't think they're going to get a rookie quarterback, personally. I think that the Titans will be stupid to not take a quarterback, especially with how bad Will Levis has been. And the Browns, stupid to not take Shedeur Sanders if he falls to them because you have Deshaun Watson as your quarterback, who is a horrible person and a horrible quarterback.
So Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, the next guy up would either be Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe.
And you don't take either of them top 3. You wait.
I don't think so either. And if you're the Steelers, what are we thinking? Because it's your team. I have to ask you because I think your opinion is more valuable here.
I am of the opinion of give me Aaron Rodgers or because I'm all for the drama now. Like, this is what this team's built upon. We had AB, we had Le'Veon Bell, we had Big Ben. Like, let's add more drama, and we had DK and Pickens. Like, let's just make this a brewing storm of just let's have a bunch of drama and just get Arch Manning next year.
I don't know if I agree with that. I would never. What I said last week as well, I would never play into the Rodgers sweepstakes. I don't want any part of it. I think that he should retire. He should stop playing games with teams. But if you're a Steelers fan and you have that mentality...
I have the mentality of let's just make this let's throw away this season, let's make it funny, let's make it for entertaining for everybody else, let's make it like a soap opera, and then let's get Arch Manning and then actually compete next year.
That would be very interesting. Let's move into our next topic, that being our NBA MVP. And who is it for you? Is it SGA or Jokic?
It's got to be Shai. He's averaging 32 points per game on a number 1 seed in the Western Conference. I don't think it could be anybody else but Shai.
So I have to say, on the flip side, Jokic. It has to be Jokic, and I know it is voter fatigue for me to say, for me to not say Jokic, because he is averaging a triple-double for his team. He's obviously valuable in the 3 games that he has not played in the past. They've been 1-2 in those games, and the only game they won was that fraudulent one we talked about last week against the Warriors, where the Warriors just didn't look good from top to bottom. So they need Jokic on that team.
Jokic has proven to be a better player than I'm going to argue what he's currently playing at. I feel like they've been the number 1 seed the past 2 years. What is going on this year?
Can I make the argument as well that SGA is quite a free throw merchant if we have ever seen one in our lives? Reminds me of James Harden. He has 593 free throw attempts. Jokic has nearly half with 383.
Okay, you're going to compare a center to a shooting guard
Absolutely.
With free throws?
I agree, but Jokic, if you watch the way he plays, he looks for fouls as well.
I understand the free throw merchant argument is, I get it, it's annoying to watch, but I can argue that's playing the game smart. You want to get more free throws. You would have more free throws than the other team, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to win.
Is part of the argument as well for the Thunder that they are the 1 seed and that the Nuggets are a lower seed? Does that contribute? Because we saw in the past year where Embiid won the MVP and the Nuggets were the higher seed that year.
That is a case of voter fatigue. It happens every sport. Oh, this guy keeps winning. Just give it to this guy. Let it happen. But this year it's different. Shai is averaging 32 points per game on a 52% field goal percentage. Like, come on.
And Luka in those years was averaging similar numbers, and he wasn't even in the conversation. So I'm not sure how SGA enters over Jokic in this conversation, but
I'm basing it off of voter fatigue and now the best player on the best team in the Western Conference.
And that's a good argument. I really can't make an argument for that. The only argument I can make is the playoffs. Who's better in the playoffs? Who's had the championship already? But this is a regular season award. I understand that. I just think that Jokic is the best player in the NBA, therefore he deserves the NBA MVP.
Hey, if you're going to argue that, LeBron should have 15 more MVPs than anybody else in the whole NBA.
That might be true as well, and that is the biggest case of voter fatigue, where we've had LeBron, we've had Kobe in the league, and they don't get the MVP every year. I mean, we see MVPs from Steve Nash, we've seen MVPs from Embiid.
I think this should be more of a conversation about how it's structured and how it should be.
Is it the best player on the best team? Is it the best player that we're seeing this season, or is it...
There is no clear guidelines, and it's also very biased reporting it's an AP, so pretty biased towards who they want to vote for and everything. There's no clear guidelines of let's see, because LeBron should have been a unanimous MVP, but Steph Curry was the first one, so congratulations, Steph, for that. But, there is no clear guidelines on what they're gauging for this.
We were only 20 games in, and the media was reporting that SGA was the front runner for MVP and making it very known. There were many posts that I saw personally making it known that he's the front runner and nobody's going to catch up to him as long as they stay number one in that conference. So there, like you said, there's a lot of bias in the media, and if Jokic doesn't win this MVP, I just think it's a disservice.
You can think of that, but it's a media award, and he can be your MVP, and I don't think anybody will be mad at that.
All right, let's head into a commercial break. We're going to talk about the games that just happened last night. We're going to talk about Thunder Clippers, where the Thunder and Clippers are coming off a 5-game win streak. We'll talk about what happened after the break.
Hi, it's Sam Sunny, a co-anchor of Royal Studios. I'm currently behind the scenes of the show you're watching, The Standings. Check me out next week on the latest episode of Scranton Scope, where I'll tell you what's going on in the Scranton community and how you can get involved. We cover events like sports, movies, music, and more. Scope has everything that you're looking for. See you there. Now back to the standings.
Welcome back from the break. I hope you enjoyed our new commercials. They are better shot than the last ones, and they are definitely going to advertise our shows that we will talk about at the end. But let's jump into our last topic, that being Thunder and Clippers last night. Like I said, they were both coming off a 5-game win streak, and the Thunder beat the Clippers 103-101.
You have to say Clippers, you're going to be the Clippers again, the little brother to the other LA team and everybody else in the West.
So, as far as who suffered the bigger loss, now the Clippers are the 8th seed in the conference, and it was just a heartbreaking loss for them because they're really building momentum in that conference now. We talked about it with the T-Wolves last week where they were building momentum with their win streak. We have to look at these teams and say, are they really contenders or are they really not? Because the Clippers are now competing with these great teams in the conference. The T-Wolves were competing with great teams in the conference, and it's confusing when we see matchups against the Nuggets where these teams are better than them, and then we see these matchups where the Thunder just look better than every team in that conference.
I think it's another thing you need to look at. Individual games, I throw out the window. Win streaks towards the end of the season, okay, I can pay attention to that. Middle of the season, I'm like, it's whatever. But think about it in a series. I think about, all right, can the Clippers do this 5 games? Can they do this in 4 games? Like, how many games can they keep that up and compete with Thunder?
And it's really like they're catching fire and good fire at the end of the season. If they can keep this up, now Harden is the real MVP of that team. He's dishing it out to everybody. Kawhi's back this season, and he looks better. They're not missing Paul George too much this season. They look just as good as they could have been. And obviously, SGA was excellent last night, and we've already talked about how good he looks this season. So, are the Thunder way above all these other teams in the conference?
No, like you said earlier. Playoffs matter, and the Thunder have proven to be playoff droppers instead of playoff risers. So, you should still be afraid of the Thunder, but wait until the playoffs to make a full prediction on anything with them.
It's interesting. It's similar to what the Cavs had, where even on a bad night, they look like one of the best teams in the NBA because they had a bad night shooting. They still beat this good Clippers team. I think in the playoffs, they're going to get through those first couple rounds pretty well, and then the real contenders show up. We saw their game against the Celtics that started this win streak. They had a really good game against them, but when we chalk it up to, do they look like they could beat the Celtics in a 7-game series? I don't really know about that one. The Celtics are the more proven team. This is a young team.
And it's funny because the same thing is happening in the East. We're like, we don't really know with the Cavs. Yeah, they're the best team in the East right now, but can they beat anybody in a 7-game series? I don't know.
And that's what the Clippers have going for them, is they have playoff proven guys. Where they have Kawhi Leonard, they have James Harden, who's a little flop in the playoffs, but you know what? He's looked really good this year, and maybe he could pull it together in this playoffs.
I can argue this is my favorite version of James Harden, where he's actually not being a ball hog for once. He's actually passing, he's dishing it out. He's being a real point guard instead of just chucking. I know, phenomenal point scorer his whole career, but imagine if he did this his whole career.
He's great when he has stars around him. We saw it when he was on the Nets, where he was a great point guard. He looked like the best version of himself. That's actually my favorite version of James Harden personally, is the one on the Nets, where they almost came out of the East If it weren't for KD's foot, they would have came out of the East. But James Harden now is playing that similar role with the Clippers, where they look really good and they look like contenders. Are they the real contenders, though? I still have the Lakers. I still have the Nuggets. I still have the Thunder, who look really good. But are the Thunder better than the Nuggets or Lakers? Maybe not. And we talked about these are young teams, just like the Cavs. They're a young team. And Donovan Mitchell has had that playoff experience. SGA has had that playoff experience. So they have that benefit going for them. But they've lost to bigger stars like Luka Doncic, like Jason Tatum.
And they even had, even the last couple of years, Miami having those miracle runs to the Eastern Conference Finals, and even the finals. I don't think anybody had them for that.
And except for the size on the team, Isaiah Hartenstein has had a very big influence on that team. He is playing his role perfectly, and it's guys like Alex Caruso and Jalen Williams who have stepped into their role, and it has to be coaching because these guys on other teams did not look like how they were now.
It's great lineup. I love at former Knick, so very biased, but he's a phenomenal defender. Fantastic. Alex Caruso also, phenomenal defender. After they go up 30, put those guys in, and what are they going to do?
They got so many draft picks that they built up over the years, and they have been able to build a team that is a contender. And talk about that second place team in the conference, the Rockets. They've built a contender and with young players that can go through a full regular season. The problem with these teams that are at the bottom or in the middle of this Western Conference is they have LeBron, they have Luka, they have Kawhi, where these guys haven't been able to play a full season. They've been injured for parts of the season. Even Jokic is aging now. Could be the same scenario. So these teams that have their young players are getting the benefit of the doubt in this conference.
Especially with the new salary floor and the salary cap and the lines. I don't know what the full term is, but now it's even harder to build a team. And a fantastic team like that Nets team, even though they all didn't play together a lot because they're all injuries, but you cannot build that Warriors team. You cannot build the Lakers. You cannot do this anymore.
This might be the strategy going forward. I think Thunder have a very good blueprint of how you're supposed to do it, where you can sign guys to vet minimums and then you can build your draft picks through trading away some of your good players. They got SGA for basically nothing. So now they look like a really good team in the conference.
This is the blueprint for the remainder of all time until this rule is either reverted or just completely changed. If you have more draft picks and you get more talent, you can just keep flushing that out. It's like a full cycle.
That's a great conversation, and that wraps up our show of The Standings. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching The Standings.
Make sure to check out other Royal Studios content.
Leave a like if you enjoyed. See you next week.